If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today, because we bring the discussion with the sources.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all so much for joining us this week on this amazing journey we called episode 149. Tonight we get to continue our discussion points on local politics. We have several interviews wrapped up, ready to go, tailored to your listening pleasure.
That's a pretty nice clean cut right there.
Yeah. Well, we do, in fairness, we have a couple of resident politicians that we have joining the show. Two of them are from Hannah's home district of Kentwood. You live in Kentwood, right?
Yeah, there's
or is it Gaines Township? I don't know which you live in.
It's in the district. Like, there's two different districts that they're overlapping. So like for the House and the Senate for the state are different cutouts, and so there was the 72nd district and
26
district number. So yeah, that so like the numbers aren't really that important if you know who your representative is, and if you actually look at your bill, or your ballot, you should be all set. And I remember was it last week or 2 weeks ago, we gave everybody the link as to where you're supposed to go, so you can actually print yours out and see the names of the people. I've been skimming through mine. I've got mine on my desk at work, and I just look at it every once in a while, man.
Exactly, and that's the thing here, right? We want to support local politics. We want to have that conversation. We want to make the conversations as available as possible, because the deal becomes, if you don't get out and vote in local politics, there's no way that we can change the federal politics, Yeah. So tonight I thought we would talk with a couple of people in Hannah's district. We spent a lot of time in my district. Then I thought, it'd be a good idea to talk with people in Hannah's district. And then what we can do is turn around and close the show out with somebody in neither one of our districts, but that is an amazing proponent for progressive change. So tonight we start the show off talking with Ron Draayer. We have Garnet Lewis on, as well as Jerry Sias. So we have a wonderful lineup tonight.
Yes.
For everybody, a little bit, as we start the show off, we could go on, a whole platform, soapbox, as you want to call it. There was some things Trump said this week. I don't know what to say. One of the big things that stood out for me this week was the fact that, Trump wants to basically tell transgender individuals they don't exist. He wants to figure out how to legislate them out. And, it's kind of funny because a lot of people are like, well, this is really shocking. I don't find this shocking at all, actually. I find this typical of a ultra-conservative GOP regime. It doesn't, is it disgusting? Yes. Do I support transgender individuals? Yes. Am I going to speak out as much as I can against the Trump administration and the illogical concept that they want to say other genders other than male and female don't exist? Absolutely. But I guess I don't find this like ultra shocking. I find it disturbing. It makes me angry. And it makes me want to continue to do what we're doing by bringing local politics on who don't support the Trump agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely agree with that. One of the things that it's kind of scary of is that these kinds of problems are essentially it's a repeat of history with a different flair to it. So, like, the problem of, I guess, the problem to very conservative people is that they're scared, or they think this is wrong, or this is bad, or there's something evil about the transgender community and the growth of this area and the visibility that they're having more of. And this is just like when we saw women wanting to get their right to vote, and colored people wanting the right to vote, and the right to exist in society and not be hidden and shrunken away and pushed into a small place where only the white men got to do whatever. Like, as society has become more diverse and more equal, it seems like this is like a cycle thing where some group is now being brought up into the fold, and they're giving visibility, and I would call it equal measuring. And not, the next group could potentially be the non-believer community. It could be a variety of things in our society that are, you can, if you say something out in public nowadays in our generation, if you're trans or if you're LGBTQ, any of the different acronyms that we have nowadays, most of the time people in our generation are like, okay, that's cool, I guess. What's the big deal? But it's still a big deal to people who lived in the previous societies. And I think that this is just another step in that. I'm just hoping that we don't change the way our government is made. Like, you don't remove people's civil rights, and we don't change the way laws are made in this country so that there is permanent damage because of fear of these outlier groups that are becoming in groups.
Exactly. And I don't know, as we continue to have these conversations, I want to support over and over again. Yeah. I want to support those minorities who are not being heard. And I feel some of my opinion is the best way we can do that is to A, speak out, B, condemn, and C, start to help promote local politics that will eventually change the federal level. And yes, I understand I have a privilege in this, and I understand that, I'm protected in some way. So my viewpoint is how do we go out and present, a way to garner change in these midterms? And to me, it's giving you more local politics to vote for.
Yeah. Just basically giving those people a platform. Anybody who is a progressive, to give them a space to talk and help convince us. I mean, two of the people we're having on tonight, I will be voting for. These are people that have, I would be supporting them over their Republican counterparts, but I have never met them in person or done anything with them, just seen their platforms. And the best I can do, because I don't have much time, is to kind of help promote their stuff. So that's kind of what we're doing. We did your stuff last week, and we're going to do some of my districts and my representatives this week. And if anybody else out there has anybody else they really want us to meet and talk to and contact with, send us the links. We'd love to talk to anybody we can while we're closing out the midterm election season this November.
Yep. So without further ado, I present to you this week's candidates that you should vote for. And without further ado, let's bring on our first guest of the night, Ron Draayer. Welcome to the show, Ron. How are you tonight?
Hi, how are you guys doing? Thanks for having me on.
We are doing absolutely amazing.
Oh, that's good.
And it's
very,
kind of
very formal.
And it's kind of funny too. There's with the company I work for, we have this consultant that I've been working with, and every time I call him, he goes, "How are you today?" And I'm like, "I'm doing amazing." He's like, "I've had the best day I've ever had since the last time you talked to me. And he says it like every single time. So hopefully you're having an amazing day.
Once you get a joke, you got to use it. If it delivers a punchline every single time,
right.
I mean, my grandfather's had the same joke for the last 30 years, and I've heard it almost every single time we go out to the grocery store or whatever. He always says, "Then thank you, come again." Oh wait, I'm sorry, that's your line to the cashier, and they have this dead stare of like, yes, that is exactly.
Well, as we continue our series, like we talked about in the intro, we are obviously looking towards local legislators, people that are running for office right now, trying to promote people that can actually make a change in Michigan. And so, Ron, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on, not only because you're running for state representative, that's not the only reason, but because you actually are in Chris Hanna's district, the 72nd district, I believe, of Michigan.
Yes. Yeah, it includes Kentwood and Gaines Township, and then the northeast corner of Allegan County, down to the casino. That's everybody knows where that is. It's in my district. That's the southern border of my district.
Awesome. So, Ron, as you're running, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us why you decided to run this year and what difference you want to make in the community.
Well, as I spoke to you earlier, I worked for 40 years in the classroom, teaching every day in the field of computer science and technology. So my background goes in computer programming, networking, and the last several years in the cybersecurity field. I've done quite a bit of work with the FBI. They have a program called InfraGard, which works with protecting our infrastructure. And so when I retired from Davenport University, this opportunity came along in the 72nd district. And I guess the top priority that I really feel that is really what's driving me to run is the state of our educational system here in Michigan. We've got some really great success stories, and some districts I think are doing pretty well. But there seems to be quite a, it's not very even. There's some districts that are really struggling, and I guess the most alarming part of it is, especially at the younger grades, the scores and achievements and so forth, just on a downward spiral. And so I really feel that what I have to offer, again, is my experience in education, experience in the classroom, working with students, that, I can help find programs that work. I know programs that work. I know things that don't work. And I guess the last thing is that I not only education, but I also look at that as an economic issue, is that, so many businesses, when they're expanding and so forth, they look at the educational system in the state that they're considering to expand their business and so forth. And, Michigan, we're going to get passed over. We are getting passed over with, companies who, the recent Google second headquarters, cited that, is that, if our educational system isn't up to speed, companies are going to go elsewhere. And so I think, not only for the students involved, but also, for our economic future, we need to make some changes, and it's not going to get fixed overnight. But I think my classroom experience can really help us find and promote programs that do work.
Yeah, and that seems to kind of be the theme this year. A lot of the representatives, at least on the Democratic side, are either teachers, have been teachers, have worked in that field, and bring a lot of that experience. I mean, we had Heidi Zuniga on earlier this month, and she was the same as you. She was an educator, and so it's exciting, right? This is exciting for me because I'm not voting for a capitalist. I'm not voting for somebody that owns his own business specifically and has made multi-million dollars. We're voting for people that are just like us, people that are in the middle class, that are working towards making America better than what it currently is.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about what you've got there is that you're talking about kind of a nice bridge between the two worlds, right? So you've got extensive education in the STEM fields, in science, technology, education, management. All of those kinds of things are really important, and you've got your education and your professional end of things, as well as your educational background, kind of blends those all together to the point where you would be able to communicate with the young kids now that have grown up bathed in this technology to try to find a nice hybrid system to keep kids educated and interested in the education system, because we are currently using a system designed to create factory workers in an analog world. We are not in an analog world anymore. I am a machinist running analog machines, but I also have CNC machines. And in my engineering aspects of everything that I do, like, I'm in this weird hybrid world too. And it's really hard to survive unless you have the technology and the tools and the techniques to do that. And I think that education is a great place to go from there. But I mean, is that some of the idea of what you're trying to do, is bridge some of that old style, make factory workers and use some of the stuff that you'd learned in the past?
And yeah, and I think where I see in speaking of, specifically in education, especially in the younger grades, what really I see is that it still comes back to those basic skills, especially reading. I guess reading is the number one concern I have. People who are in the trades, it used to be, when I was growing up here, take a big hammer and pound on this thing. Well, it's not like that anymore. You mentioned just the other day I was at talking to someone, and he was a CNC programmer, exactly, and he's explaining some of the stuff he has to do and some of the sophisticated material, and it's like, this is a changed world, but you have to have those basic reading skills and math skills and so forth. So I guess my point is that no matter what type of profession you're going into, those reading skills and just the basics are just going to be totally essential. When I taught computer classes, on the days where we were doing hands-on on the computer, boy, everybody loved that and so forth. But then, today we're going to be looking at the technical material and, reading some of the technical, knowledge and so forth. And boy, you could just see the eyes sometimes, when reading some of the reading comprehension and so forth, you could just see the struggle some of them were having. And it's like, oh boy, that's, and I think we all instinctively see it's only going to require more of that, more of those, basic skills, no matter what your job or profession turns out to be. So I guess, coming back to, like, say, blending the old reading, writing, arithmetic type of things, but yet those still are totally essential today and will be in the future.
Yeah. And another one of the things that's unique about that, right, is mental health services. And the other thing I've noticed about a lot of the candidates is that's a huge focus. And, some of me wonders if it's because we had this huge turnout for number 45, and the logic behind why people want to vote for him is just mired in disgust. And it's kind of funny because you were just talking about education, and one of the articles I recently read talks about how you can't get your conclusions from the news. It doesn't matter what source it is. You should never just read an article. Even Snopes, you shouldn't go to Snopes and go, yep, it's debunked because of this. You should go there, read why, compare it, and then do that. And that's something that I think that our education system isn't quite always teaching. My stepson had a story, today where they wanted to talk about the migration caravan, right, in his Spanish class of all places, and the teacher basically blew him off. Well, where's the engagement here? There's no engagement with the students. And I get maybe at school you don't want to create this environment where you're going to have a debate, especially in Zealand. Right. Not everybody agrees in Zealand, probably. But the funny thing is that it was almost somewhat shut down and say, hey, just watch the movie. And here we have representatives on the show saying it's not about watching a movie. It's about reading. It's about learning the material and then coming back to class and challenging us on it. And maybe I'm just old school, but to me, to learn something is a lot easier if I read it than if I listen to it. It's great to listen to it and watch it, but I got to go back and read it and do the research myself before I just accept it.
I think one of the things that I always have difficulty with in so many states, and I haven't heard about it as much in Michigan, but in a lot of places, it's actually state legislators are kind of micromanaging. And one of the things they want to do is, well, everybody has to be majoring in STEM, science and technology and so forth. And actually, my background is in liberal arts. I have a bachelor's degree from Calvin College, a Bachelor of Arts. And I tell people that, it's those types of degrees and skills that you need in terms of critical thinking and analysis and so forth are more important than ever. I always told my computer students, if you really want to get far in this field, if you really want to grow and have a top career, my suggestion to you is to take more writing classes, more speech classes, more interpersonal communication classes, all those those ones that we all kind of, roll our eyes at. But what I think it's really true is that it's those skills of dealing with people and being able to critically analyze and solve problems that are important, even in a highly technical field like, computer networking or whatever. It's still that personal touch and being able to critically analyze problems to come to solutions. Not that everybody has to be go back to a liberal arts degree, but certainly those types of classes really do have value. And, I think I could have kind of a unique background in that of coming from technology, but yet I still see the importance of being able to develop those types of skills that, they never go out of style. They really don't.
And that's true, and it's kind of funny because I think people push some of that off because everybody just wants to lower taxes. Everybody just wants to protect the border, right? They just push some of these things off. But here we have candidates on the show saying, hey, hold on a second. Maybe we need to focus on, cleaning the state up first. One of the things that we talked about in the pre-show about some of the things you've done, you mentioned you consult for the FBI. So hopefully they're not listening into this conversation now. I'm not going to say I hate the FBI, but I'm not typically that big of a police state type person. But what's interesting is just your background in that cybersecurity, that discussion, right? Because that's extremely important right now. What has the GOP done recently? They've gotten rid of net neutrality. It's this big, oh, hey, who cares type thing. And, what I don't think people understand is maybe it won't affect us for 5 years. But I'm wagering in 5 to 6 years, it's going to start to affect us very negatively because companies will finally be bold enough not to care. Now, maybe we can get rid of this current administration. Maybe if you think about it, Ron, maybe by the time you win this year and then you turn around, maybe you'll be able to run, for a federal level here and maybe help us take back some of this net neutrality. So tell us how your background will help, improve Michigan and some of the focus that you're going to bring into the conversation.
Well, I think, before I get to the federal level, I got about 13 days left of campaigning for this race right now. So I don't want to jump ahead. But, no, I know what you're saying. I think that, one of the challenges that I really see as important, and again, coming just back to those basic skills, when I work for the FBI, they have an organization called InfraGard, which is FBI, state police, business leaders, academics, to protect our critical infrastructure, electrical system, water system, dam systems, transportation systems, etc. I think the big, and it keeps coming back to those people skills and those basic skills. When we sit at a table and plan out and work in terms of, how can we build our cyber defenses? How do we get people involved and so forth? When we're sitting at that table and doing what we can, what programs can we develop to, protect our citizens and our systems of Michigan? It really doesn't matter the people at the table. I'm sure there are some people who are more left leaning like I am. I know there are some people who are very, politically on the opposite end of the spectrum of me. But we have to be able to, we have to have that ability to work together for the common good. And even though we may have our differences politically or philosophically and so forth, when it comes down to, what is important for Michigan, how do we protect ourselves from, I'm very concerned right now about election hacking. That's rather near and dear to my heart right now in the next couple of weeks. So, just to use that as an example, it doesn't matter if you're, or shouldn't matter, and it really doesn't matter at that level if you're a Democrat or Republican or, what your persuasion is that, look, we need to work together to build our defenses from cyber attacks and other types of people who would do harm to us. And I think that's a skill we've kind of lost in the sense that people just get their political point of view, and then they just don't want to. They'll just stick to that. They don't want to hear anything else, and this is the way it has to be. Well, you can be true to your foundation and core, but you also have to look for commonality with people. And I think that's an acquired skill. It's not something you can just do overnight. But it takes experience, and I guess that's part of what I think I could bring to the table of, when I'm working with the FBI and some of the agencies and the people involved, is that I can really help us develop solutions that are going to be good for all of us. So I think those are the types of experience that I can bring, and to help as we as we look into the future, but both, again, my, in the cybersecurity field, but even in a broader level, in terms of just issues that are facing the state, whatever it happens to be.
That's one of the things actually why I wanted to go into next is basically you on your website. You have a really great website and layout. Whoever does your web design did quite a nice job. I've seen some pretty bad campaign pages. Yours is quite nice. The information.
Well, thank you. I'll be sure to pass that along to her.
Great. Yeah, the infrastructure and everything that we have. We had the typical Michigan infrastructure problems that every candidate has issues with, and so there's two kinds of infrastructure that I think we need to really think about. Is we've been talking about rebuilding our physical infrastructure, but that technological infrastructure is the other end of things. In Kentwood, they do the area that I'm in is it's a very high tax base, but they do a lot for the area. They spend a lot of money. They really think things through as far as making sure their budget is always a surplus, getting lines underground for a lot of reasons, for protection, for stuff like that. So they do a lot to make sure that everything is done well, and planning for that infrastructure as well. So I guess what kind of changes do you think you would need in our district itself? Like maybe Kentwood's a good spot, but let's say Gaines or some of the other areas that maybe need to do some upgrades. Where would you kind of do some of that electrical as well as physical upgrades?
Well, you really have hit maybe one of the biggest problems in this district, and just the differences. Yes, as we talked before, you and I are both residents of Kentwood, and in terms of the technology, seems to go pretty well. But part of my district, and I know Garnet Lewis, when she comes on, we cover Allegan County, and boy, you talk about a day and night difference. There are, and I've seen some of the maps and so forth, there are tremendous numbers of areas in Allegan County, because it's more rural, where there's either very little or no internet, or is still dial up, or that level of technology. And so it's a real challenge, and part of it, again, in the Allegan County area, is it's an educational issue. Is that students they got to go home and do their homework, and maybe they have to do some research. Well, they get home, and if they don't have access to high-speed internet, it really hurts them educational wise. So it's a challenge that's really faced, like I say, especially in the Allegan county part of my district, and I know that they had a funding for a millage a while ago that didn't go through, and they're trying to get some different partnerships and so forth. But that part of our infrastructure is something that there's no magic fix to that, and obviously it costs money, but it's got to be a top priority. That especially for our young people growing up today. Like I say, they're going to school and learning. The ability to access resources and information online is just paramount. We have to have that. So that's a really good question in terms of some of the distinctions and some of the issues that people face.
Yeah, and that's, again, it's like I said, this is an exciting time. I'm hoping in 2 weeks I will not be disappointed. But what's exciting now is actually seeing. What's exciting now though is being part of the process and watching how, since 45 has come into office, how there's a even larger movement to take back at the state level. Like I would love to take the federal level back too. Don't get me wrong, but there's a huge movement to take the local level back. And while the federal level, they're doing crazy things like trying to tell transgender people they don't exist, to saying there's never going to be a caravan to come to, the U.S. We still have to take care of people at the local level. And in every day, I was downtown Detroit, and I know it's a little far from Grand Rapids, but I was in downtown Detroit yesterday. And I happened to be, we were at a bar having dinner before the concert we were going to. We walk out and there was this guy getting arrested. Well, the first thing I do, let's pull my cell phone out. It's like, I'm going to record this because you never know what could happen. Yeah. And in fairness to the Detroit police, they handled it very well. And even for the person they were arresting that was very aggressive, they handled it very well. There was no abuse that went on, and different things like that. But the point being is, you look at that person and you understand that he's in poverty. You can tell this guy's homeless. You could tell this guy probably committed a small crime. I'm not 100% sure because I didn't ask the guy, but people are forced to resort to do things to make life happen if they're not provided the essentials. So the big thing for me, and the last large question I have is how or what are some of your plans to help affect healthcare in Michigan? Because it's been turned around completely over the last 8 to 10 years. And I'm hoping that our new current legislation that will be in office in 2 weeks will be able to help turn it around.
Well, and I think you really hit it on the head too. And I've been emphasizing to people, look, obviously there's big problems in Washington. And so in Michigan, it's up to us to figure it out, because we're really not going to get any help from, what's going on there in Washington. We're the ones that have to come together and figure this out. I think just one other part of that before I come to the healthcare thing is that, one of the common denominators, especially for young kids with their low scores and so forth, is poverty. In other words, there's a really strong correlation between students who do poorly in schools and struggle in schools and who come from a background of economic poverty. And so I think that's, we have to address that part of it. Specifically in terms of the healthcare, and I've really come just in the last, few months or so, that it's time in this country that we move to a system where healthcare for all, at least the basic healthcare for all, is going to be there for everybody. I say this. The one I mentioned at the state level is, I always mention that the person who really pioneered this at a state level was Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he was governor of Massachusetts, he was the one who really was pushing it for a state level, access to health care. And I still remember in 2008 when he ran for president, I thought, well, I don't think I'm going to vote for the guy, but at least, he's going to come in with some good ideas because he has the experience, and it's something that, would add a lot to the discussion. And, once he ran for president, he just totally ran away from the program that I thought was a good model.
It was Romney Care, wasn't it?
Yeah, they call it Romney Care, right. And so it moved at the state level to make healthcare available to everybody. The access. One of the things, and it's real simple for people to say, well, the Medicare for all and so forth, but there are systems that work. I'm 66 years old. I'm on Medicare. It works. It works just fine. Now, one of the big misconceptions is it's not free, but maybe we would have some sort of a graduated payment system. But the system itself, I believe, is sound. And so I think that in this state and in this country, I think people are ready to move to systems that do work, that at least the basics are covered. And I think the other part too, I think more and more is that insurance companies and so forth, there's always been a reluctance to anything that has to do with preventive care. Somehow, well, we don't cover that because that's a preventive care. It seems like that's just backwards. If we can do things to prevent people from having problems and steps and so forth, then that's going to take away at the other end, some of the problems that we have. So I really, there's some different models out there for the state, but I really am a strong advocate, and it's time here in Michigan and in the United States, but we'll stick with Michigan first. We're just people have the basic access to basic health coverage without going to the emergency room as their primary doctor and so forth. That's not working. That's not working for people, and it's economically not working either. Yeah. So I'm a strong supporter that it's time that we figure this out.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Ron, for joining us tonight. Everybody should go out. If you're in his district, vote for Ron. Don't vote for him if you're not in his district. Don't write him into another district. Though I guess if you got enough write-in votes, that'd be cool too. But I'd prefer anybody in your district to go out and vote for you, especially because you're running against, I believe, Stephen Johnson. Very generic name.
Yeah, where can people find you?
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic, and that's a whole nother cast we can do here. Yeah, but we'll just leave it at that. But certainly, I think just to wrap up here, I think there's a really big distinction is that I really believe that there are government programs that work, and if they're done right, they can be used to help people. And instead of just voting no on everything. I worked on a project last week at Shady Side Park in Dutton, where they were doing some water restoration with Plaster Creek, which runs through our district. And there was a partnership with the state and the county and some of the citizens. And it's a great example of where government can be used for good. And so I believe that those types of programs are good, rather than someone who just basically says no to everything. And we shouldn't be funding anything. So I guess that's really the difference that I see in this election. I thank you for your support.
Awesome. Tell everybody where they can find you and how they can support you.
Yeah, I'm at ronforstaterep.com, ronforstaterep.com, and also on Facebook, Ron for State Rep. We're going to be posting some more information. And it's not too late. We're going to be doing some get out the vote and, those traditional getting people to help us out. But certainly, if they would go to ronforstaterep.com, there's a variety of activities and ways that they can contribute. And I can't say enough and how much I appreciate that. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you much for joining us, Ron Draper, representative for the 72nd. Draayer. Did I say Draper? I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is a running thing on the show. It's Chris's favorite thing to do is to add and subtract letters from people's names. We enjoy it quite thoroughly. But once again, thanks again for coming out.
As long as you get that little circle next to my name filled in right, that's all that counts.
Hey, everybody go out and vote for Ron Draayer.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us
Nice
tonight.
talking to you.
Like what you're hearing? Check out more Cellar Door Skeptics every week right here on Spreaker and iTunes. Make sure you come back and check out new episodes with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna. And always, remember, prepare for the revolution.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. For the second part of our engagement this evening, we're bringing on the other representative in Hannah's district, Garnet Lewis. Please welcome to the show, Garnet. How are you doing tonight, ma'am?
I'm great. Thank you so much. This is fun. Thanks for the opportunity.
And it's been great tonight. We've been able to do everything recording-wise over Google Hangout. So this has been very easy getting everybody together. And it's exciting, as I said earlier, it's exciting because, last week on the show we did people from my district. This week we get to do people from Hannah's district. And, we like to think we're a podcast that supports the local legislator. So
we're trying to grow that small grassroots thing. That's one of the things that we talked about when we first started the show out. Just like, what the heck are we going to do? And I mean, you can do national politics, but everybody talks national politics all the time. We do quite a bit, but we also, around this time of year when that local stuff picks up, like we really try to define the way into it. One, it helps us get involved. We're pretty busy professionals, so we can't really quite get out there and bang around. But if we can spread voices, I mean, that's what we can offer. That's what we're doing. So we're really excited to have everybody on for this election cycle.
Great.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So, Garnet, you're running for the 26th district.
Yes.
It happens to be Kentwood, I think, Allegan, Van Buren area, Gaines Township.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to throw your hat into the circus.
Oh, all right. Well, my background is pretty varied, so I'll do it really fast. I'm actually an Air Force brat, born in England and raised in Germany. My father was a lifetimer in the Air Force, and my mother was a native German. So because she was a native, he was able to extend his entire stay to Germany. I have family in Germany. It's my second language. When he retired from the service in '78, we came back to the United States, and I started college in Missouri. And he's from St. Louis, Missouri originally. So my career, I basically intended to be a veterinarian when I first started college, and ended up getting caught up in student activities and student leadership, and went off in a whole different direction. And basically had a career of 30 years in higher education administration, working housing residence life, student activities, student leadership development, strategic planning. I went from Missouri to Northern Michigan University, and that's where I got my master's degree. Ended up at Northern quite by accident, but it was probably the best accident that ever happened to me. And then ended up down in Texas to get my doctorate in higher ed administration. And so there's a whole bunch missing in there, but came back to Michigan in 1999, primarily because I really missed the seasons. And, Texas is great and everything, but my heart was really here in Michigan. So I've been back now 19 years, back in the state of Michigan. To kind of get to the second part of your question, my reason for running is really, frankly, quite simple. I didn't even go to sleep the night of the election in 2016. I was up all night long, and I could not believe it. And the next morning when my spouse woke up, we were both like, what the hell are we going to do? And, we had intended to move to Saugatuck to be retired. And it was like, no, we cannot. So it was literally kind of a rejuvenation of our own political interest, our kind of grassroots interest, and really kind of heavily got involved again in the local community and just trying to get folks organized. I really didn't intend to run. I was more interested in kind of helping people be engaged and be educated about the process and kind of learn all the acronyms of the Democratic Party and what it means to run for office. And around the beginning of the year, it looked like we really needed somebody to step up and run for Senate. And a little bit of arm twisting on locals' parts. Before you knew it, I was running for Senate. So, but really, the main reason is primarily because we elected an individual to be the president of this country, and that was the first. The second is then we had a state GOP, which will not hold him accountable for what I consider to be very unprofessional, unpresidential, disrespectful behavior. And I think, quite frankly, that we are all better than this, whether we're running for a state or local office or what we're running for a federal office. There has to be a level of dignity and professionalism to anyone in those roles. And I just find it unconscionable where we are right now as a country. And so if not me, then whom? I jumped in with both feet, and here I am. So retired university administrator, kind of a lot like Ron, who you had on before, and you were talking about just so many of us coming out of the education field. And I think, for a lot of us, we bring a lot of skills with us that are kind of easily transferable into the political realm. So with that, I'll stop and let you talk.
And it's kind of funny because, and we have said that there's a lot of educators that are running for office right now, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, one of the big things is the GOP always pushes business, business, business. And look where it's gotten us as a society. Look what they're doing to our education process. My sister's a teacher. And by the way, my sister is not as far left as I am. Let it be said that my family is definitely very conservative compared to me. But even in her realm, she talks about the disadvantages, the awful things that are happening in the education system. And we talk through these things together, her and I do. And it's kind of funny because it's like, well, if you vote this way that these people support things you want to change, right? Yeah, I know. Okay, well, just as long as we got that out there. But the idea behind what do we need to do to change Michigan right now? What are some of the big things that we need to do to change Michigan? We need to educate people more. Look at what's happened in Flint, for Christ's sake. We have one side of the state where a city is pretty much poisoning their citizens. A governor comes in and says, and then we go, hold on, are you sure you're not going to be held responsible for this? And nobody wants to hold them to task. Well, how do we fix that? We need to educate the young people so that when they come of age to start voting, they can turn this around even more. Now, if we could turn it around now, great. But we need to get young people out voting. We need to get people out to the point where if they understand the process, and that's one of the things we talked about with Ron, right? Mm-hmm. We could, if you just take Fox News or CNN at its word, you're no better than anyone else. You need to do the research, understand what you're being told, and think for yourself.
Right. Yeah.
So,
and it's if you think about it, and I'm going to kind of guess, do a little bit of guessing here, educated guessing here. When I talk to younger voters, folks who I would really love to have show up at the polls, on November the 6th, the things that are really resonating, the issues that are really resonating with them are healthcare, single-payer healthcare for all, and free college tuition. And what I say to them is, if that is what you want and that is what you believe is important, you've got to show up and vote. To just talk about it and wish it and to be a Bernieite and not go any further than that. If you don't show up and actually put pen to paper on November the 6th, then those things will not happen. I think there are actually a number of people who believe strongly that we should move towards a single payer system. And there are enough people who believe that we should do as much as we can to make tuition and college affordable or post-secondary ed affordable. But the only way you're going to get that is if you elect people who support those ideals.
So if we start talking about adding basic critical thinking, all those kinds of things in schools, you mentioned that you been to education administration or something along those lines. So you already have an idea of kind of the red tape bureaucracy. So obviously pairing with someone like Ron, who has expertise specifically in being a teacher and in computer science and technology and places like that, we also still have to be able to create these new systems for. We basically have to create, as we said with Ron, a newer educational system that's not designed to create factory workers, but designed to create entrepreneurs and free thinkers, and that leading edge of things. So, because obviously we all know that the third grade education reading level that came out earlier this year was just an utter failure for Michigan, as it has been for the last decade or so. I guess what are some like the basic core things that you think you would be able to add with what your experience that you have is to kind of get things moving a little bit?
Yeah. So the main reason I decided to run is because of education, and primarily because of educational funding. And there's a distinct difference just being, running because you support education, but it comes down to the dollars. And you have to put the funding into the support services that are needed in the schools. To just have a teacher in a classroom without the support services, you're basically tying one hand behind their back and telling them to run up a hill, a sandy hill. And in the day when we fully funded public education, you had school psychologists, you had the counselors, you had the nurse. A teacher had a teacher's aide in the classroom with them. Now we basically have the teacher alone in a classroom with sometimes 30, 40 kids, and they have evaluation requirements that take up more than 50% of their time, and testing requirements. And my friends who are in the classroom, I just want to teach my kids, but that we're so concerned about these evaluation measures and adequate yearly progress that we don't even think about what the kids need. And quite frankly, not every child learns the same. So anyway, I'll go back. I use my brother as an example. When my brother was second or third grade, at the time we didn't know it was dyslexia, but now we know it's dyslexia. But I would walk my brother down to school for individualized attention in reading every morning before school started. And that's because they had the funding available for reading specialists. And he is a mechanical engineer. He has a great career. He's done very well. But I think if that had not been available to him, and in some schools that certainly isn't available, I don't know what he would have done, right? So we have to put the funding in the schools to support our teachers so that they can do the jobs that they were trained to do, that they got a degree for. So.
Exactly. So they don't have to do all the jobs.
Right. They don't have to do all the jobs. Yeah, I know. Sorry, I'll digress a little bit. I've been all over the district, and one of the groups that I met with Van Buren superintendents, and they said, Garnet's just criminal, that it's embarrassing when we offer a person with a 4-year degree less than $30,000 a year to be a teacher. It's embarrassing.
Oh, yeah.
It's embarrassing.
And it's all based on your tenure, right? It's based on your tenure, where you've worked before, right. And all these other things.
Yeah. They're coming fresh out of school. I mean, they finished up their student teaching and they're ready to go in the classroom. They don't have any tenure.
No, exactly.
At all.
And so they go, well, I could pay you bottom dollar. And to them, bottom dollar is $30,000. Well, you can come work for my company as a material handler and not you just sit on a high-low all day long for $30,000 a year.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, and so we want to pay doctors hundreds of thousands of dollars, but yet we don't want to pay teachers.
Right.
And for me, I feel it's criminal too, And then when you look at some of the programs, and I can't get a hold of this lady. I've tried to get a hold of this lady. There's a lady that she has this closet, right? And what she would do as a teacher, or she was a custodian actually, not even a teacher. She would give.
I know where you're going.
She would give kids food that came from underprivileged areas, that they didn't get a meal in the morning.
Right.
Whether it's because their parents worked or not, it has nothing to do with it. She didn't care.
Right.
That's the mentality. Where's that lady? Why is she not running? And why are we not supporting her? She should be running for Congress, for Christ's sake, because just that humanitarian value right there, that's what we need in politics.
Right. Right. And we seem to have lost that a little bit. It's interesting. And I was listening in on your conversation with Ron Draayer earlier. What we've gotten into this cycle in this state of people running for one position, and then once they term out, then they'll move on to the next. And without speaking too negatively about my opponent, I mean, the young man is a career politician, and so the message that he is running on now is the same message he was running on when he first ran and was elected in 2011. Roads, auto insurance, and ending sanctuary cities. It's like, okay, dude, a lot has changed since 2011. Get with the picture. But they don't. They're so interested in just occupying the space and then moving up. So that if he becomes state senator, then probably the next step is he's being groomed for Fred Upton's spot in Congress, and so he's not really doing anything. He's just made himself a great cush job with benefits. So
exactly, and that happened in Ottawa County too. Not my district specifically, but Roger Victory. That's what he did.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'll disparage him. I'm sorry. I think that dude's a horrible individual. And people like him, in my opinion, are people where we look at you want to talk about a dynasty. I get it, right? That's a dynasty, though. So if you're going to call out Hillary and the Clintons on this, you should at least at minimum, be calling this guy out. And why in God's green earth are you electing this person in just the opposite side of the state? Or, the opposite side of the political spectrum. I don't understand it. And I don't understand why we don't have laws that prevent this either.
Well, certainly the founding fathers, their intention was not that people would be career politicians. It was their full intention that you'd go and serve and then go back to the farm or wherever.
Exactly.
You certainly weren't going to stay for the rest of your life in a state house seat or a Senate seat or Congress. And
it wasn't to make money either, right? I mean, I will, again, and I think, some of the problem becomes in because there are career politicians, you see the finances for these positions go up, right?
Yeah.
Screw it.
Yeah. Well, again, without disparaging my opponent too much, the majority of his funding is coming from PACs.
Exactly.
He was on the energy committee. So, I mean, huge donations from DTE, consumers. I'm trying to think which other, and then of course some of the really conservative organizations, like really conservative. But the majority of his money is PAC money. He's not even getting money from people. And that's where I think we've really gone wrong too, when we're basically, Citizens United, we're basically allowing corporations to fund our candidates.
Exactly.
We lose track.
Yeah. He's got 20 people, it turns out, to a fundraiser that donate 80% of that month's income, right? I mean, come on, people. For Christ's sake, at that point we should be, we should be a little scared here.
Yeah.
Well, just to bring a tiny little bit of historical fun to this, it's really awesome that you mentioned you would serve and then become a farmer.
Yeah.
Because one of my favorite historical people of all time is Lucius Cincinnatus, the guy that Cincinnati is named after.
Okay.
He was given absolute Roman power when there was a war. Then they had, and he literally ran as full-fledged Caesar, and then gave it all back, and he just became a farmer again. The whole idea of, the idea of politicians was to, it was kind of a burden almost. There's a rule of government where there isn't an election. It's just a random person throughout society is selected, given that position. And then after their term is out, so it's the average person. It's the regular guy who works with his hands, or is a middle class person. That's not always going to be a certain branch of people.
Yeah.
So that's a really nice thing to hear that we're on the same wavelength as far as money in these local politics, and we're seeing more money in local politics than we really like. But I just had one quick question: is that there is there's something that we've been hearing about with the PFAS. And the health and stuff. And one of the things on your website, you talk a lot about environmental issues, is that I think it's about time to start talking about PFAS as some level where we're talking, there should not be anything higher than this. And so this is an area that I'm curious about as far as what kind of direction do you think the state should go? Is anything that would be under your power for taking care of some of those environmental issues?
Well, and going to sound like a good Democrat here, but I really do think that in order to see safeguards put into place, and when it comes to environmental protections, we're going to have to elect Democrats, quite frankly. Whitmer's got a great plan, but for me, and I'm not sure what the acceptable level is, so I apologize for not knowing that. But just the mere fact that people are even concerned that their drinking water is safe to drink. I mean, we should, no one in this state, in this country should have that concern. In my district specifically, I've got Otsego. It's not necessarily PFAS, but it's dioxin in the water. And a lot of it is water runoff from the old paper mills. And they used to take that sludge and put it out on the roads and the farm fields. Well, 20, 30 years later, suddenly they've got these cancer clusters all over the place. And so now they're trying to figure out, what's an acceptable level of dioxin. There always is some dioxin in the water, but so as a state, quite frankly, I think it'll be the Democratic Party will say, this is what the acceptable level is. Anything above that is unacceptable and it needs to be rectified. The other thing is, I think as well as I do, we are just on the beginning of learning how much of this is a problem. Yeah. And I don't, and it's not to sound like a conspiracy person or anything, but I think we will be dealing with this for decades, and primarily because the collective we as a state allowed this stuff to happen over the last 30 to 40 years for the benefit of profits and corporations. It's like, seriously, at what point in time do we decide as citizens and as a state that, our own health is perhaps more important than the bottom dollar? I mean, it's just stunning to me that we've allowed ourselves to get this far. And in a way, kind of back to the whole reason I decided to jump in to run, I think this was a major wake-up call for all of us. That we just, people kind of, I may vote this time, I may not vote. You see now what happens when you don't care.
Exactly.
You get everything we've got. So, what's going to happen is the Democrats are going to take back the House and pick up some of the seats in the Senate, and are going to have to do the dirty work of raising your taxes and cleaning up contamination all over this state. And it's just a vicious cycle. But you know what? Bring it on. That's the great thing for me. I am 57. Should I be fortunate enough to win, I will serve as the senator, and that is it. So I'm going to be able to look myself in the mirror every morning because I'm doing the right thing for the citizens of this state. It's not about my next job. It's not about, nothing. It's about people. People. Sorry, I'm on my soapbox.
Hey, that's the point of the show. The difference is I don't go on a soapbox for like 3 weeks now. So once the election happens, I'll be on a soapbox for like 2 months on the show. Yeah. But, and right now is the point is you guys get the soapbox, not me. You all get the soapbox, not me. Yeah. It kind of as I want to bring it all back together, right? Yeah. When we started having the conversation, you and I did before the show, we were talking a little bit, about your background, different things, why you were running. And on the front of your page, it says that you are fiscally responsible, but socially progressive. Mm-hmm. And I told you, I said, well, on this show, Hannah's a democratic socialist, and I'm probably whatever he called me, an anarcho-socialist. Like, I'm pretty far left, in fairness, So I need to understand on your side, what does fiscally responsible mean? Because we've been talking about single-payer healthcare. You support it. Mm-hmm. Raising taxes. You support it. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are going to question you and say, hey, what is fiscally responsible if you're for making us pay more money? Yeah. Hey, I am a small business owner. In addition to having had a background in education, my spouse and I have been investors in commercial property for 15 years now.
I'm the business manager for our LLC, and I have to balance my books. No matter what we want to do, no matter what repairs are needed, no matter what additional property we might want to be able to add, I still, at the end of the day, have to balance my books, right? And the state has that very same responsibility. And that's when I talk about being fiscally responsible. Here's my budget. I'm going to manage my budget wisely. I'm going to get the input from the other people in the business with me. And at the end of the day, I'm going to make the best decisions for our business so that we can continue to grow and expand. That, for me, is what I would bring as a business owner to the role of state senator. Here's our budget. What do we want to be known for as a state? Do we want to be known for great quality schools that are funded and pays the teachers well? Do we want to be known for a place where businesses want to come and set up shop because their kids are safe, their kids are getting a good education, they can drive on the roads, you name it. They can expand their business, they can buy a house, they can afford to buy a house, they make a livable wage. So for me, when I talk about being fiscally responsible, that's what I mean. I have a budget. Here's how I'm going to make it work. I'll make tough choices, but they'll be for the benefit of the state.
So in other words, if it means cutting the salaries of every single person in the Senate and the House, you're all for that versus cutting money out of the education system.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I don't think it'll have to come to that. I mean, do you know what a state senator and a state representative makes?
I'm going to wager it's between 60 and 80 grand a year tops.
Yeah, it's 75, 79, I think is the highest. And then there's like a $10,800 stipend for.
And if you're a GOP candidate, you get all the kickback too, I mean. But
you get quite a bit.
We won't go into that.
Yeah, you get quite a bit. It's interesting because I've heard of candidates running before. They're like, I won't take a salary, and that's fine. And I personally don't need the salary, but I want us to be sure that we continue to have respect for the positions that do the hard work. So whether you're an elected political person like a state representative or a senator, or whether you're a teacher, you should be paid what you're worth. And it shouldn't be who can get to the bottom fastest, right? It should be about having good jobs that pay good livable wages based on your education and experience, quite frankly. So,
well, good.
Yeah.
Well, Garnet, thank you so much for joining our show. As we wrap up, tell everybody, A, where they can find you, and B, how they can support you.
Oh, okay. Well, the webpage is easy. It's just www.garnetlewisforstatesenate.com. Once you're to the webpage, it'll take you to Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can communicate any way you want. I'm usually pretty good about responding to messages in all those venues, so whatever works is fine as well. There's also the phone number for the campaign office. If they feel like volunteering, that'd be awesome, because we're in the last 2 weeks and we're really ramping up. Yeah. So doing everything we can to hit the doors. We're doing a lot of phone banking. We're also hustling. We're using a lot of texting this time around. So, trying every avenue we can. So
awesome.
That would be great.
Thank you so much, Garnet, for joining us. Garnet Lewis for State Senate of the Michigan's 26th District. And I didn't butcher the name on this one.
Yeah, you did good. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Really appreciate it. Hi, Jerry.
Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics. Considering how you want to help Cellar Door Skeptics, head over to iTunes or your favorite podcast app and give us a rating, because every rating helps push us in front of new listeners. And since our main goal here at Cellar Door Skeptics is to provide the most accurate information possible, we hope that more ratings will mean that more people get to hear the topics that we're presenting. We don't insist that we get a 5-star rating, but Hannah's favorite number is 5, and the more gold stars he gets, the more special he's gonna feel. So what do you say? Head on over to iTunes or Google Play, give us a rating, and help engage with Cellar Door Skeptics today. Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. As we close the show out in our big push for local politics, which is, again, the theme that we've been striving for, over the last 3 or 4 episodes. We welcome Jerry Sias. Hopefully I got his name right, to the show. Jerry, welcome to the show, sir. How are you tonight?
I appreciate that. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. And again, the themes of the show have been local politics. How do we change the world one step at a time? And, it's kind of funny. Earlier in the segment, people have heard me say the reason we want to interview local politics is because at some point I'm giving up on federal politics at this time. And I'm saying we need to focus on local politics. How do we put in a more progressive set of politicians in the local state? Because you know what? If the GOP wants to run it the way they've been running it for, the last 2 years, to say, hey, states' right, fine. Let's play their game. Let's put people in office that are going to focus on states' rights, but on a more progressive angle. And one of the reasons we wanted to interview you is because in the opening statement on your website, you say, I'm a blue-collar, middle-class Michigander who understands your concerns. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit, Jerry, about why you wanted to run for the 89th district and what you plan to bring to our great state of Michigan.
Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, I totally agree. Local politics are what affects our lives the most, and that when I began my campaign, that was something that was on my platform, that I wanted to bring universal medicine to Michigan, and take it out of the control of the bureaucrats in Washington and have it controlled in Lansing instead. And I still don't see why we can't do that. If many of you know, candidate Abdul had a program to do just that, to keep universal medicine in Michigan. But the reason that I'm really running is because, I see a whole generation of millennials that are just buried in school debt, and if they're not buried in school debt, they can't find jobs that pays the rent or covers the high cost of auto insurance. And, I'm running for my generation, Generation X. We grew up believing in the American dream, but, the American dream is dissipated. We've been left behind in this economy. Nobody's looking out for the working families of Michigan anymore. And a lot of us still have our millennial children living in our basements or our attics because they're paying high school debt. So that's why I'm running. And I'm also running for the elderly and our senior citizens who live on a fixed income and they don't have the money to pay for their medicine, or now they're getting taxed on their retirement plans, and there's no representation for them. So like I said, I'm just a blue collar guy running to represent the blue collar people of Michigan.
And that's amazing, right? And it's kind of funny because my grandfather, he worked at Steelcase for a long time. He retired when he found out he had cancer, and he went ahead and retired, spent a bunch of money because he was told he had a year to live. Well, guess what? Here we are in 2018. He's still alive. He's in his 80s. He's not, I don't want to say cancer free, but whatever the terminology is, the cancer is at a very, very low rate. We'll put it that way.
Stable. Yeah.
There you go. And he continues to vote GOP, right? Because that's how he grew up. That's what he was told to do. That's what his religion tells him to do. But, it's funny because he tells me all the time about how his Medicaid doesn't pay for all his cancer medicine. And I'm sitting here saying, well, why are you not voting for a progressive candidate, Grandpa? That's going to help you because you're 83. You should not have to hold a job at 83. At this point in your life, you should be able to do what you want. If that's sit on the couch and drink coffee or tea and watch sports, so be it. If you want to go out and volunteer like you do, so be it. But you shouldn't have to be worried about an income, and that's what you pay these taxes for and all these other things. So why are you not voting for a candidate that's going to support you in your later years? Why are you continuing to vote for all these GOP candidates that are going to be like, nope, you need to pay more in healthcare. Oh, we're going to strip Medicaid privileges away from you. It's non-comprehensible to me.
It's almost a cult of personality. I mean, to put it in light terms, I mean, it's hard to really reach out to those people. And, growing up in West Michigan, I'm actually a registered Republican. When, I was a younger man, I grew up in a Republican home. All my family members and friends were Republicans. So, that's what I registered as. But as I grew older and started seeing what the Republican Party's doing to the middle class and the working families and just pandering to, the 1% and big corporations, I started to see things in another way. And I quickly turned Democrat, more progressive. And I started seeing, that the middle class need a lobbyist in Lansing or in Washington. We can't afford to send, a lobbyist there to defend us. So we need representation that'll do that in Lansing. So that's what I'm all about, definitely. And, getting through to that cult of personality where people just time and time again always vote Republican or for the GOP when it's against their best interests. We need to re-educate these folks and say, look, things have changed. Times are different. We need to do better by our senior citizens and by our young. There's no retirement. You're right. I have an aunt who worked all her life in the hospital, put away for retirement, and lost a lot of it in the last crash, in Wall Street in 2008. And she's still trying to recover from that. Now she needs to work at Walmart full time just to make ends meet and pay for her medications and her retirement and just to survive. So we really need to look at where we're going as a country and as a society and start to understand that, we need to take care of our people and our citizens better than we are and quit pandering to the wealthy and the big corporations. That's where it comes.
Yeah, you think people would understand, what 40 years later, trickle-down economics does not work, at least for the majority of people. It works for you. It's like the lottery, right? How many people play the lottery? You want to win a bunch of money. You play the lottery. You give your money away. It's that hope and dream. Well, I think people think trickle-down economics are the same way. Well, if I just play this, maybe I'm going to be the one awesome or two awesome people that get to benefit from this. But it hasn't worked so far. Why are you backing the wrong horse,
Right, exactly. Well, they still believe that somehow that dream is going to come to them. And, the trickle-down economic thing is just, it's a farce. I mean, Ronald Reagan started in the 80s, and look at what our society has done since then. Our roads, our infrastructure is crumbling. Our mental health is non-existent anymore. I mean, we don't put back into our communities. We don't put back into our societies anymore because of trickle-down economics. Giving tax breaks to the rich is not working. They're just sinking their money in offshore accounts. They're not reinvesting it in the community, and if they do, they get their name up there, big DeVos name or, some shiny on the building. But if they don't get any recognition for it, you don't see them giving out any anthropology. They're not out giving to the community. So, it's time that we start taking care of the citizens of Michigan and the people of Michigan first and give up on the wealthy. They're going to do what they're going to do. If they can make more money shipping their jobs overseas, they're going to do it no matter what tax breaks we give them in Michigan. And not only that, but a lot of our economy now is driven by small business. These big corporations like GM and Chrysler, they've moved to Canada, Mexico. They don't employ all the people they used to in Michigan. So why are we still pandering to them? Where's the bailout for the small businessman, the little mom and pop shops? There's no help for them, but all the help's going to the top 1%, and that's the GOP's plan. And that's who's paying for their election. That's who they're going to pander to. But we need to break through to the working families in Michigan and make them understand that both parties have faults, but the Democratic Party, I feel, looks out more for the working families than the GOP, and that's why I side with the Democrats.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing, we were talking about the lottery, right? And my one of my sons was like, "Hey, Dad, how the lottery started?" Now, I did not fact check this, so everybody listening, if you want to fact check me, you're welcome to. But he said, the lottery started by a way to create a tax for the people, right? A way that they could collect tax without it being this mandated thing, and it gave people the option to say, "Hey, I could win some of this money." Obviously, how many people win the lottery every year? Very, very, very few. I'll be honest. I bought a lottery ticket. Do I expect to win? No. Did I cut two pops out of my life for a day? Sure.
Yeah. I got to check my numbers too. Yeah.
There you go. See,
$2 billion or whatever, that caught my attention. What's change Michigan if I win? I'll tell you.
Yeah. And then that's, one of the sad things I found in Michigan, and this is a little bit of a slap against the Democratic Party, in my opinion, a little bit too, is, back in the day, they, somebody specifically ran on the aspect that, hey, look, we're going to up the sin tax, right? And we're going to use some of this money to fund schools. Well, what did they do? Everybody just pulled money out of education. So instead of matching the funds from the lottery, they just pulled the extra money out because, hey, now we have a revenue from this. And to me, that seems like, illogical. And one of the platforms that you're running on is livable wages, right? Let people play the lottery, let people do what they're going to do, but why not pay people a livable wage so that they can pay the livable tax wage that they're required to pay to help benefit the government, to help not need to use the lottery per se, or to enhance, the money going into education to help better educate students inside of Michigan.
Yeah, exactly. Starting with the lottery, that most of that funding was supposed to, and that revenue was all supposed to go into education when they started it, and like you said, now everybody's dipping in the pot and that revenue is being spread out all over Michigan. And that needs to change. I definitely believe that the lottery can provide some revenues that is needed for our schools, but we need to keep it in the schools. And another thing we need to quit doing, of course, is sharing our revenues with charter schools and privately owned businesses. That's another thing that's taking money out of our public school system. And then going back to the livable wage, that is crucial in our society. Everybody asks, how are we going to solve the problem of affordable housing and getting our kids out of our homes, and it's all based on a livable wage. If we had a livable wage, we wouldn't need affordable housing for our young kids coming up. Affordable housing, that sounds like the projects to me, and I don't like that word, affordable housing. Why don't we just give people enough to survive on and buy homes and live the little American dream and that they always, most of us want? We're not asking for millions of dollars or a big yachts. All we want is enough to survive and buy a little home in our city and have kids and raise them, and hopefully they can do better than we did. But, our kids, that's something too that bothers me, is I don't see my kids doing better than my generation. The millennials are not doing better than Generation X. And I think that's just going to keep decreasing as generations go on. And that's a problem we need to look into. The fact that the next generation is not going to do better than the past generation is an issue. So affordable living, affordable wages is very crucial and important to me, and we definitely need to back it. And I think what our legislation did in the House with taking up that legislation and bringing it on the floor so that the people don't get a vote on it with the minimum wage legislation is just dirty pool. And I think that they have every intention of repealing it during the lame duck session. And, they took the voice away from the people. No matter how they spin it, they took the voice away from the people. And that's wrong. A lot of people supported that bill, supported that amendment, and they signed the petitions, and they got out and they got signatures, and they worked real hard to get it through and get it done. They faced court battles, and then the floor picked it up. The House picked it up, put it on the floor, and now they can just do whatever they feel with it. And that's just not right. So, a livable wage is very important to Michigan, important to our society, important to our citizens. So it's something we got to defend.
Exactly. Another one of the stances I noticed on your website was for vocational training in public schools with a free 2-year college tuition and student debt reduction.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say, hey, that's admirable, right? Obviously, I'm pretty progressive if you hadn't figured it out yet. So, to me, that's just even more logical. Hey, we need to educate people more. We need to give them free college. We need to help reduce student debt. in our society, though, if we want to look at it just in the state of Michigan, what are some of your proposals or what are some of your ideas in how we can help obtain that?
Well, first, I think we need to start to rebuild our public schools. We need to reinvest in our public schools, take the money that's going to charter schools and private companies and put it back into our public schools. We can't blame our public schools for, lack of performance because they have lack of funding. And it's time that we really start to rebuild our public schools. The public schools it's part of our community. It's part of what holds our community together. I mean, and it's real important to me to rebuild them. But what we need to do is rebuild the skilled trades. Not every kid wants to go to college and spend 4 years in college. I think we need to rebuild skilled trades in the technologies of tomorrow, like CAD, robotics, mechanical drawing, electrical engineering, electrical, havoc, heating and cooling, things of that nature, things where they can have a knowledgeable start when they get out into the workforce and have at least some knowledge in the field they want to go into. But rebuilding our schools is a top priority to me. I mean, our public schools, not our charter schools. I think we're going down the wrong road. If you look at Michigan schools, we're the only state that in the country that is recessed in our public schools. We've gone from the top 10% to the bottom 10% in the past 20 years. And, if you look at history, it all started with charter schools and it's gone downhill since then. We need to definitely look into that.
Exactly. And I've always been against charter schools anyway. And ironically enough, my sister, as a teacher, had to work at a charter school. And she doesn't have anything good to say about it. And she's not even just this blue Democrat, right? She's an independent, but she has nothing positive to say about charter schools at all.
They're not paid well. They don't get benefits. Yeah, they're not treated well. They're working with, a lot of kids in their classrooms. They're forced to work after hours to do different events and different things for the school. They got no representation, and that's something we need to change. That's a noble cause, education and being a teacher. And we need to treat those folks like they're the crucial part of our society that they are. They need to be treated better. They need to be paid better. They need to be better respected. As far as all the evaluation and testing that's going on in our public schools right now, we're comparing teachers and schools with one another for performance rates, and that's not right. They need to be educating our kids. You give them smaller classroom sizes so they can have more one-on-one time with students, and you give them the funding they need to do their job and the tools they need to do their job, and everything will fall in place. And, as far as secondary education, community colleges, I think, would really play a crucial part in giving people at least 2 years of free college. Right now, community college is an inexpensive way to go to college as it is. Most of it supported by the taxpayers of the county. Unfortunately, like Ottawa County, we don't have a community college. So if we go to Muskegon Community College, we pay a higher tuition rate. So what I think we need to do is have counties working together and supporting other community colleges to give tuition breaks to students. As far as students are concerned now that are buried in school debt, I think that we need to offer some kind of interest-free loans through the state or some kind of grants to help them pay off their loans. And folks who go into fields where they give back to society or they go into civil engineering or something of that nature. Once they work in the field so long, I think that we should pay off their tuition and give them credit for what they're doing. So, yeah.
Exactly. And you bring up a good point that I don't think I've ever thought about before. Ottawa County does not have a community college.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's actually really sad because now that I think about it, I re-registered my living address after my senior year to Kentwood so I could get the discount. Yep. And I'm 35, so you got to think that was like 15 almost 18 years ago. God, I'm old.
Sure. And you're not the only one. I know people too have family members in Muskegon, so they changed their mailing address or their driver's license address to the Muskegon resident, and then they get a break on their tuition. So, they're playing the game anyways. It's time that we just start giving the community college more funding and more access to students who don't live in a county with a community college. So, and more tuition breaks.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Jerry, for joining us tonight.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate you staying up late with me tonight and doing this. So thank you.
No problem. You're the one that's dressed up in a suit, so I'm going to say, hey, you look dapper, and it's late. So,
thanks, I tried.
But as we close out, one of the things I wanted to talk about is your logo, right? Your logo's unique, and I pointed this out in the pre-show, and I just have to bring it up again because your logo not only looks locally made, it feels to me like you're representing a populace in Michigan and then saying, hey, vote for me because I'm like you. I support things. I'm not a millionaire. Look, vote for me because I can help change society to be more fair for those of us that have to actually work harder at our job and didn't just inherit a bunch of money. And for those of you who, because there's no video to the show, it's just all audio, right? So let me really quick describe Jerry's logo. It's the state of Michigan. It's blue. It's got a worker's, hard hat on and a tool belt. So, Jerry, tell us why you chose that and how it represents you and your campaign.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for noticing again. The logo really represents me and who I am. I came up through the trades. I started as an electrical apprentice. After the military, I couldn't afford a 4-year education, so I looked to the trades, and I found an affordable living coming up through the trades as an apprentice. I worked my way up to owning my own business. And I wanted a logo that just represented who I am and who I think represents who the citizens of Michigan are, just hardworking blue-collar folks, who go out every day and do the best they can just to survive. And they're finding themselves buried in debt and buried in an economy that's just leaving them behind. So I want them to know that I represent them, and I know what it's like to put on a tool belt and get dirty and work hard every day. So, and I'll be thinking about that when I'm representing them in Lansing. I know what it takes. I know what it is to get your fingernails dirty, for sure.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Jerry, for joining us. Tell everybody where they can get a hold of you and how they can support your campaign.
Sure. You can visit my website. It's www.jerrysiasmichigan89.com. Or you can find me on Facebook at Blue Collar 89, and you can donate to my campaign on either sites, Facebook or on my website. So if you want to know more about me, that's a good way to check me out and check out my platform and what I stand for.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jerry, for joining the show. Everybody, it's Jerry Sias running for Michigan State House of Representatives of the 89th District. Thank you so much, Jerry, for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thanks again, guys.
You too. As we wrap the show out, we had great conversations tonight with Jerry, Garnet, and Ron. And it kind of speaks to the volumes of the show where we wanted to go with this. We wanted to have the conversations at the local level because if we don't change things locally, we are never going to change things federally. So Amen. I think this week was a great, bam, bam, bam conversation with political candidates. And we've only got 2 weeks left, folks. 2 weeks till Election Day. So if you want to come out, support midterms, support Propositions 1 through 3, this is the time to do it.
Yeah, we kind of sort of need to do a prop show, don't we?
We did a little bit, and maybe that could be the topic to next week's show. There you go. You're alluding to things I was already thinking of for next week's show. So yeah, that's what we're looking at. Is next week we're going to be talking about the propositions. If we're lucky, we'll get Gretchen Whitmore on. I highly doubt it, but maybe we'll get lucky and she'll join the show. I've messaged her like 17 times to say, "Hey, come on the show." And that's a little bit of exaggeration. It's only been 3, but
I was going to say, if you got 17 in there, we'll probably get a visit from the Michigan Secret Service. Like, hey,
no,
it
was 3 times.
That's cool.
Anyway, so as we wrap the show up tonight, we have for the last month and a half done something called a quick save. And these are topics, different articles, things Chris and I have, randomly thought of during the week that we've saved and come back to at a later time.
Yeah, I always thought it would be something just fun to use as just kind of like a little quick snapshot of something that you thought was cool. Mine for this week was there's a comedian named Dave Allen. He's a British guy, real fun, clean comedy, the kind of stuff that's easy to just kind of thrust onto anyone and just kind of let them digest it. I didn't know what it was. It was this was in a non-believer community, and they were like, Dave Allen and his first contact with God. And I was like, okay, that's kind of a risky click, but I gave it a shot, and it's really funny. His style of comedy brings back the mind of some of the greats throughout that British setup and punchline past. And he just talks about things like the church and how it's really difficult to explain the idea and the concept of God, and how it can be kind of scary. So one of the things he said is they go into church with there's nuns and women of the church, and he'd walk in, and he's like, okay, now you listen, you got to make sure you pay attention and listen to what's going on. And he's like, open the door, and he's like, I'm going to listen to whatever this woman tells me to do, because the first thing you see when you walk in there is a guy nailed to a cross. It's like, if they're willing to do that to that guy, what are they going to do to me if I don't listen? Like that kind of humor. It hits a hard point to children in some of the things that are kind of scary about that. And so it's a fun way to ask questions. And some of the things you asked about is the confusingness between 3 different things being in one person, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, how that can be confusing, but it's interesting in the way that he delivers it, that it's not kind of an angry moment or a preachy moment. It's just kind of like, and how children can kind of how they would kind of absorb that. And so I really thought it was cool, and it's something that everyone can listen to, and you can I guess see how you feel when you're done with it. Maybe show grandpa and grandma.
Maybe. Probably not my family, at least not my grandpa and grandma. Maybe other people's, but not mine.
I think it could be a conversation starter, and then hopefully everybody keeps it nice and quiet. Like maybe not do it on like Thanksgiving before dinner or something.
We never know.
You might not have the best prescription on that one, but what's yours?
My quick save for the week was from this stupid Facebook page called Inspiring Philosophy, right? And it's kind of one of those things where this is back from the atheist analysis days. And, I debated at least one, if not 2 of their philosophers, we'll call them, that were on there. But they had this post called Judas Had. And it says this: Judas had the best pastor, the best leader, the best advisor, the best counselor, yet he failed. The problem is not the leadership or the church that you go to. If your attitude or character doesn't change, or your heart doesn't want to transform, you will always be the same. And I thought about this, right? I thought about this because, to me, Judas is like a necessary evil in the Christian doctrine, right? There has to be somebody that betrays Jesus, that gets him caught, that sends him to the gallows, essentially, or to the cross, that gets him crucified so he can die for everybody's sins. Because without that specific salvation, Christianity crumbles. You then have Judaism, right? You don't have Christianity. And so
you don't have that, what did they call it? Vicarious redemption. You have to have that sacrifice.
So tell me again how Judas failed. To me, he has to do this. Otherwise, Jesus could not have died for all humanity's sins. So by that specific logic, right? By that logic, Judas didn't fail, but he succeeded. And he succeeded according to what needed to be done for him, for us to all be saved, right? So if you think about it, to me, Judas is a martyr. He's somebody that should be worshipped. He should be praised. Everybody should go to their church and tell their pastor, hey, by the way, I know that Judas guy. He wasn't an evil character. He was evil, but only because God dictated he was evil. Oh, wait a minute. God prescribed something to be evil so that God could save everything. Immediate contradiction, therefore, I don't know. Like,
yeah, it was a necessary thing. So it's not so much that he was bad. It was a necessary, because they had to fulfill the prophecies. I don't know. I agree what your point is there. It's just like, it's a tough one to answer. I would love to hear what people think as far as, is the Judas character in the story, is he really evil, or was he a necessary thing so that whole idea of the storyline, the whole sacrifice could come to pass? Because it's necessary. Somebody has to betray to for your savior to be caught and forced to be sacrificed. I don't know. It's one of those things that I don't usually hear people talk about the intricacies very often, and having not grown up in it myself, I'm always curious to hear other people's perspectives.
Yeah, and then that's my take. It was one of those things. Normally we don't talk about religious things, and I don't want to disparage religions specifically because of this, right? But to me, this seems like a doctrinal fail. To me, this is the point where you can distinguish the fact of this is a book versus your belief set. And that if you could distinguish the two, you're probably going to be more moralistic than those that just subscribe directly to this book. But with that being said, we have to wrap the show up. We have to move on for the week. And we get to come back next week with another brand new episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all for joining us tonight through this journey. Make sure you go out and vote November 6th. Right along with Hannah and I, we'll have our pictures online with our little, I don't get a button, it's a sticker. We get an I vote sticker, which, yeah, go figure, they give out for free. I get a free sticker for voting. I'm excited by that.
Sticker socialism.
It is. It's amazing. I'm tempted to contribute to sticker socialism. Anyway, thank you all so much for having a good night. Join us next week with another amazing episode on Cellar Door Skeptics.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker. CellarDoorSkeptics.com.